Hello, this is Will Schlecht from IronCrow AI, and today I'm going to be doing a follow-up on the search tab's new prosecution history capabilities, its ability to access the image file wrapper files for different US patent applications and then work with those in our different tabs. And I thought it would be interesting to do a deep dive into this feature while also comparing it with a somewhat similar feature from PatentBots, their Ask Gen AI um, tool, which is part of their PatentPlex kind of application data retrieval system. It's not exactly an apples to apples comparison. These are somewhat different tools, but it's always good to see what is available on the market for kind of AI tools to help you with patent prosecution in particular. I think both of these tools are pretty much targeted towards the prosecution side of patent applications. So to start with, I believe that the way that the PatentPlex tool works is you have to search by application number. So if you know the application number, you can find it that way. That's how we got this case to work with as our example application. Um, our search tool is a little bit more open-ended. You can search for application number. So in this case, we'll ask our tool to find the US application number 14,942,551, and we can perform that search. But we could also ask for finding applications that were examined by different art units or examiners, or that were drafted by different law firms. So pretty open-ended, I think. So the searching capability seems a little bit different. And once we have our search results, let's just go ahead and send these to the interrogation tab so that we can kind of do our comparison of how to review this prosecution history for this application. So as a reminder, in order to do that, we can take our overview file, which is going to summarize basically all of the kind of metadata for this application, and then the prosecution history. And I think in this case, we will, let's take everything. So all of the different types of prosecution files, and we will send this to the interrogation tab. All right, so once the prosecution history files have been sent to the interrogation tab, you can confirm that by going over to that tab and looking at this incredibly long list of prosecution documents. And let's see. So with PatentPlex system, you would click on this button. That takes you to this page, and it will tell you that you can ask Gen AI questions about this patent application and its history. And they note that they don't store any context, so that each question is independent of previous answers. So that's kind of interesting. I'm not sure why you wouldn't be able to store context. But what that means is that each of your questions isn't going to be able to refer back to previous messages in the conversation history. So that's a pretty big difference already, since the interrogation tab is it's a conversational modality. So you send messages, you get responses, and then as you build a chat history, that kind of improves the tool's ability to know what you want and to kind of gain knowledge of the application that you're working on so that its answers can be more helpful for that particular task. Whereas the PatentPlex tool, it's going to be a bit like working with an assistant that has amnesia. So every time you ask a question, you're going to have to phrase the question in such a way that it is complete, that it contains all necessary information to answer that question. So let's go through a series of prompts. Now that we basically have, I'm pretty sure that this has access to the different image file wrapper files here. The list of image file wrapper files that they have is pretty small in comparison to what we get. So with the search tab and our ability to send different prosecution documents, you can select what you want. Whereas I don't think you can select these documents. You get what you get, and it looks like it's going to be specification, the claims, then all of the remarks made and amendments, and the different versions of the claims. There's nothing like notices of allowance or appeal briefs or any of that. So if you're interested in any of that information, I don't think this is a good tool, or you wouldn't be able to to learn anything about those types of documents from the PatentPlex tool. Whereas with our tool, we have, you know, every type of document. So in examiner interview summaries, we've got, looks like there weren't any appeals in this case, but if there were, you'd have those documents. And just as a reminder of what types of documents we send, this is the current list. We're thinking of expanding this probably, but for the time being, it's already pretty comprehensive and has a lot more documents than what you can query with the PatentPlex tool. But kind of proceeding, let's go through just three prompts, kind of three simple prompts, because I don't want this to take a ton of time for each of these tools and see what they give. So I entered this prompt, but you actually can't see it because the text box doesn't wrap. Let me move this over. There we go. This prompt is, can you please provide a timeline of the prosecution history of this patent application? So just a super high level question to give us an overview of what is happening with this application. So let's submit that and it will start thinking. And in the meantime, let's just go ahead and give a similar prompt to our tool. So can you please provide a timeline of the prosecution history? All the files are selected, and let's run that. Okay, so we've gotten our response back, and let's look at what our timeline is. Prosecution history timeline for this application. So the application was filed in 2015. Then later that same year, it was complete. It had a filing receipt, case docketed, changes power of attorney. First non-final office action was issued. So it's basically reading like a timeline. So we have each of the dates in chronological order and all of the events that happened. Third non-final office action. So lots of rounds of office action rejections and responses. Cool. So that looks pretty good. And I can confirm that, I've reviewed this application and this information looks correct. And then let's look at our PatentPlex answer. So the prosecution history timeline, initial application filed with original claims, applicant submitted amendments, non-final office action. So you can see that this is nice. It's also in the form of a timeline, but it's going to be missing some of the events because it just doesn't have all of the information for this application. So like, for example, early on, this piece of information about the case being docketed to the examiner and the change in power of attorney, PatentPlex won't have that information because it just doesn't have those types of documents. Also, it looks like this overall summary is a bit shorter, which I guess makes sense because it's not going to be reviewing the same kind of list of events because it really only has knowledge of basically responses with claim amendments and rejections. So final and non-final office action rejections. So cool. That looks pretty good. So let's proceed to ask another question. So just as, a very simple question, how many final and non-final office actions were issued for this application? So let's ask that. And let's also ask that question to the PatentPlex tool. How many final and non-final office actions were issued? And let's see if we can actually count. So there's one non-final, then a final, another non-final, and then a fourth final. So looks like based off of this timeline that there were two non-final and two final office action rejections. Let's actually compare that with our timeline to see if that lines up. So let's just do uh, office. Let's search for office action to make that easier. So we have the first non-final, then there was a final, then there was a second non-final, a third non-final, second final, and that's it. So I think that's five. And let's confirm. Yeah, so our answer is there were five office actions in total, two final and three non-final. So three non-final. I think that the PatentPlex tool only has two non-final. So first non-final and the second non-final. So it's actually missing one of the non-final rejections. So even though it doesn't have that many files that it's working with, and it actually has all five of the office action rejections, it somehow misses that in its timeline. So that's not great, but let's give it another chance. Let's ask it explicitly how many final and non-final office actions were issued for this application. And it says that there were two office actions. So that's very wrong. Even in its previous answer, it has listed four. And it says there's just one final and one non-final. And yep, I don't know. That's not great. If you're trying to ask a very, very basic question with information that it should have, that it also has in its chat history, you would hope that it could at least answer that, because how can you trust a tool if, how can you trust a tool to give a kind of substantive analysis of, say, like a prior art rejection, or to review the basis that an examiner gave for a certain rejection, if it can't count the number of office actions that it has explicit access to? Whereas our tool is able to get the correct number the first time. And it also is able to access its own chat history. So even if it makes a mistake, which it very, very rarely does, you'd be able to point it out, and it would then have that information in the chat history, and you could proceed kind of with the correct information. So let's ask one final question. This is the very most complicated question. So we're going to ask the tool to generate a complete timeline of the prosecution history of this patent application by summarizing every office action and subsequent response and remark and amendments made by the applicant. So basically, if you were just starting to work on a case that you got assigned, and maybe you weren't the prosecuting attorney previously, and it was transferred to you or something, you want to kind of contextualize yourself to this application, you could run a query like this and hopefully get a sense of what has happened. And also, if you just want to see maybe a case has already been completed, like it's been granted or abandoned, and you've got a same examiner, or you're facing similar types of rejections, and you want to get a sense of how those rejections were either overcome or failed to overcome those rejections, then you could run a query like this to get a sense of what happened, what strategies were effective. So let's run this query, and then let's go over to the PatentPlex tool and give it the same question. So let's ask it to kind of produce this more detailed summary of everything that happened with prosecution. So we'll let those tools think. All right, so we've got our response. So let's see what our prosecution history looks like. So detailed prosecution history of US patent application 1494 50 55-1. So filed, application deemed complete. All right, so let's look at mostly just the office actions and the responses, because I think that's what I'm particularly interested in. So first non-final office action, there was a double patenting rejection, 102 and a 103 rejection. Pretty classic first office action. Applicant then initiated an interview. Following that, there was a response filed, and the double patenting rejection was held in abeyance. Independent claims 2, 9, 16 were amended to add certain limitations. And then applicant argued that the reference Cole failed to teach the amended limitations, and the examiner agreed, or the applicant stated that the examiner had agreed during the interview that the amendments would overcome Cole. Let's look at kind of a similar analysis by the PatentPlex tool. So initial filing, okay, first office action. So there were rejections for non-statutory double patenting. All right, that's the same. And then over parent application claims, let's see, there was a 103 rejection over Cole and other references. So that's interesting because there was a 103 rejection, but there was also a 102 rejection. And so it's missing the anticipation rejection from the first office action, which isn't great. Make sure I'm not missing that. In the applicant's response, they amended claims to clarify limitations and then argued, et cetera, requested that the double patenting rejection be held in abeyance, and the applicant, yep, okay. So let's kind of continue from there. So then there was a final office action. So there was the double patenting rejection was maintained, and then there was new 103 rejection. We've got a rejection over Grocop in view of Jang. So that's the new 103 rejection. Seems like they overcame the 102 rejection. Let's see what the PatentPlex tool says. So the final office action, final rejection maintained for non-statutory double patenting. And then, yep, Grocop, Jang, Lioli, and that new reference. Examiner found prior art combinations. Okay, looks good. There was another interview, so a very aggressive interview strategy in this case. Then on December 9th, 2016, there was an RCE filed with amendments where claims 2, 9, and 16 were amended to specify obtaining specialized speech processing model from a network accessible data store separate from the system server, separate from the client computing device. And then where the obtaining is initiated subsequent to receipt of audio data. Okay, let's see what the PatentPlex tool says. Applicant amended independent claims 2, 9, 16 to clarify obtaining specialized speech processing model. Yeah, it seems like it's a bit shorter. I think it's missing some of the details, but that at least is factually correct. Like they're not missing a rejection like they did in the first office action. So let's see. Let's continue. So then there's another non-final. The examiner withdrew the finality of the previous final rejection due to a timely filed request for continued examination, maintained rejections over Lioli, Weber, then double patenting rejection was maintained. And then in our summary, third round of prosecution, second non-final office action. There's new 103 rejection, so Lioli, and then the Lioli, Weber, and Parsatarathi reference, looking good. Then the response to the second non-final office action, there were no new claim amendments, which is interesting. And then the applicant argued that Weber should not be considered prior art because Weber was under an obligation to assign to Amazon, which was, I think, the applicant for the present application. So that's an interesting prosecution detail. The applicant was able to kind of disqualify one of the 103 references because it was basically the same applicant. And let's see if that is present in the PatentPlex summary. So applicant's response, they amended the claims to clarify. That's weird because ours said it didn't amend the claims. So let's see, this was July 5th, 2017, July 5th, 2017. Applicant amended claims to clarify timing. So I reviewed this beforehand to be able to kind of be the referee on any discrepancies between the tools, and there were no claim amendments in this response. So this is factually incorrect. And let's see if it includes the kind of Weber disqualification as prior art because it was Weber was obligated to assign to the same applicant. Argued claims are patentable. No, so yeah, I don't even, it looks like it probably didn't even have information about this response, and it's just kind of hallucinating this part, whereas this is all factually correct. And that's a kind of important piece of the prosecution narrative, right? That Weber was able to be disqualified. Okay, so I think I have kind of gone on long enough. I don't want to go through the entire prosecution history. I think that might take more time than I was anticipating. Um, but I think you get the sense that our tool is able to kind of in a more detailed way go through each of the relevant files and kind of produce factual summaries. Whereas it looks like the PatentPlex tool, it misses details, which is really problematic if you're trying to do this type of research where you want to get an overarching view of what happened during the prosecution of an application. And um, if you miss a rejection or you miss an office action, that might really change how you view that prosecution history and really interfere with your ability to, use that information in an actionable way to apply it to the case that you're working on. So just a quick comparison of these two tools. I think that, it's good to have something like this. And I think that the formatting of the tool is nice. Like it has bolding for the different sections. But just the fact that you're not able to actually select which files you're interested in. So I didn't even mention this really, but you can take any of these files and you can kind of focus on which ones are relevant to you. You don't have to look at all the files at the same time. The reason I had all files selected at the same time is just so we could do more of an apples to apples comparison, because I'm pretty sure that's how this tool works. It has all of these files in its memory, and we have all of these files in our memory. So that's a more fair way to compare the two tools. But if you wanted to do something like just review the first office action and response to see how the prosecution started off, you're able to do that with our tool. Like all you have to do is unselect the irrelevant files, and now you have kind of customized the LLM Sandbox's memory to focus on the things that are specific to your interests. So basically, you're able to customize a lot more. You actually have control over how the tool works so that you can use your intelligence as a human in conjunction with the power of these AI tools to then produce work product, I think, better than what a human or an AI could produce. Whereas the PatentPlex tool, I don't know, it seems like the design philosophy is a little bit different. It doesn't want to give, I think, really any options or any control over how the tool works to the user, which is great for certain kinds of users. If you don't want to customize things, and if you really just want something that's incredibly simple, almost like a toy version of our LLM sandbox, then you could use something like this. That's fine. That's a design choice, I would say. But I do think where things are sort of substantively problematic is one, there's no conversation history, so you're not able to build on your work. So say I wanted to uh, dig deeper into one of the answers that it got wrong. I can't just refer back to its previous answer and say, hey, could you please expand on your summary of the July 5th, 2017 office action response? It wouldn't know what I'm talking about. It would then just have to go back to the initial sources. So it's like I said, it's like talking to somebody with amnesia. You might often encounter that it's going to produce very similar responses because it's not able to build upon its previous answers or its previous or like your previous corrections to its output. So quick overview of these two tools. Yeah, I think it's interesting that there's more tools like this being built. I'm not sure. I don't know if PatentBots is particularly, you know, it took them a long time to build this tool, and so I don't think that they're that excited to get on board with large language model tools. And just based off of the way that they've designed this tool, it feels like it's missing, I think, some of the key power that large language model tools have. And one of the big ones is the conversational ability. So just my input. Take it for what you will, and I'll talk to you again next time.